Almost anyone who's ever been on a trip to Israel will tell you that their tour guide is the absolute best one in all of Israel. They'll tell you that their tour guide has secret connections to the Mossad, that he was part of the Entebbe raid, that he founded the internet, and that his cousin's falafel stand is the best one in all of Israel, and he gets 20% of everyone he brings. You absolutely have to use my tour guide for your next trip, people tell me. And it's true. There are many fabulous guides in Israel, and most of them have truly incredible stories to tell. One synagogue trip that I led nearly 15 years ago, our tour guide was a Russian-born woman named Lana. She was very knowledgeable. She had a great sense of humor. We ended up leading 5 or 6 trips together. I remember one day we were traveling on the bus, and she began to tell a little bit about her family's history with the group. She moved to Israel from Moscow when she was 13 years old. She completed high school in Israel and served as a high-ranking soldier in Gaza during the Second Intifada. She then took out a small bag from her knapsack and began to tell a story about her father. In the mid-1960s, when her father was growing up in Moscow, it was announced that Golda Meir would be visiting the Soviet Union in an official government capacity, and she would be visiting the Great Synagogue of Moscow. The Jewish community was nervous about attending for fear that the KGB would have agents monitoring and recording which Jews attended the service. Despite these fears, a huge crowd turned out to see Golda. That morning there was a bar mitzvah. And when Golda ascended the bima, she noticed that the bar mitzvah boy, was not wearing a yarmulke. When she asked why, the boy said, "I don't have one." No one really did in those days in the Soviet Union. Golda then instructed her security guard to remove his kippah so that he could give it to the boy for his bar mitzvah. "You can't have a bar mitzvah without a kippah," she told him. Inside the kippah, she wrote Mazel Tov and signed her name. As Lana was telling the group this story, she then removed a kippah from her bag and held it up. That bar mitzvah boy was my father, and this was that yarmulke. As the bus continued, she wisely pointed out the differences between Jewish life in Israel as opposed to the Soviet Union. In the Soviet Union, it was difficult to even locate a kippah. No one was studying Torah. No one spoke the language of Torah. No one studied Jewish culture or history. But in Israel, she said, our people is coming alive. Here, Hebrew letters dance around you everywhere you look. Here, the continuation of the life of our people is playing out. Here, there is a renewal of Jewish language, culture, and the study of Torah. Like the rebirth of the Jewish world in Israel, the last 2,000 years have seen the Jewish people produce a variety of responses to persecution. New movements emerged that offered Jews hope and a path towards transcending degradation. After the Second Temple was destroyed, the rise of Talmudic thought propelled Jewish life forward. In the Middle Ages and the onslaught of Christendom and Islamic persecution, the Kabbalistic movement took form. After the Inquisition, Hasidic Judaism followed. And when the pogroms reappeared in the mid to late 1800s, the notion of Zionism took root. The only difference was that Zionism, unlike all the other movements that came before it, was not grounded in religion and Jewish law. In fact, many of the early Zionists repudiated Jewish practice and shunned Jewish law. The Jews of the Soviet Union were Zionist. They dreamed of lifting the Iron Curtain and making Aliyah. And as soon as the Soviet Empire collapsed, nearly 1 million Jews made their way immediately to Israel. But because of Soviet oppression, they arrived with little to no understanding of Judaism and Jewish law. Ironically, Zionism has become a way of telling the Jewish story in a way that does not often include Jewish law. Many Jews define themselves today by their Zionist principles: how much they support Israel, which causes they support, what positions they take on Israel's foreign affairs. For the first time in Jewish history, a worldwide Jewish movement crystallized that was not necessarily interested in Torah study, Jewish law, or observance. In many ways, Zionism offered a new way of being Jewish. This brought with it positive and negative ramifications. On the good side, Jews had reason to be interested in their national story and the promotion of the Jewish state. On the negative side, we became distanced from the ancient wisdom and dictums that had bound our people together throughout the ages. As we moved away from observing halakha, Jewish law, our knowledge of Torah, Talmud, Midrash, and the evolution of Jewish thought decreased. Today, if I calculated the net worth of all of the undergraduate and graduate degrees of Temple Beth Am members, the numbers could fund a small country. But if I calculated the amount of time, money, and energy we have devoted to Torah study, to real Jewish learning, those numbers might shrink a little bit. The evil Soviet Empire made a concerted effort to rid themselves of Jewish scholarship. Yet on a parallel track, as we've found success here in the secular world, we've drifted away from Jewish scholarship. We've in some ways lost touch with Jewish law and tradition, and in the process, became less familiar with the manifold generations of Jews that came before us. 1 year ago, the explosion of October 7th sent a wake-up call throughout the Jewish world. No matter how connected any of us were to our Jewish identities, when we heard the news of the attack and learned of the depths of Hamas's depravity, when we saw the horrific suffering of innocent Israelis, babies, children, teens, Holocaust survivors, when we couldn't take our eyes off the TV screens and we watched the terror unfold before us in real time, there was not one Jew anywhere who didn't connect in the most profound and spiritual sense with our brothers and sisters in Israel. We hear about tragedies all the time, and they're devastating. But very little, if anything, stirs our souls like what happened in Israel 1 year ago. And before we even had a chance to come to terms with the enormity of this tragedy, much of the world was ready to dismiss our grief. It didn't take long for Israel to be portrayed as menacing aggressors, punishing the innocent and helpless Palestinian neighbors. It didn't take long for the global groundswell of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism to morph seamlessly into hatred of everything Jewish. It didn't take long before hostage posters became political, or before the diseased rot in the world of academia gravitated to the surface. It didn't take long for the infected, intersectionalized world to erroneously equate their struggles with the struggles of Hamas and their terrorist allies. And as these terrible events unfolded, when we were pushed to the brink by forces from all directions, when we were forced to defend ourselves in classrooms, chat rooms, media outlets, and in our own private and professional settings, we occasionally found ourselves unprepared. I can't tell you how many times I'd find on my phone, "Rabbi, a friend of mine just said this online about Israel. What do I say?" At that moment, when we were most needed to defend our people and our faith, we looked closely in the mirror and we were forced to say, "I'm not 100% sure I have the tools necessary to promote my faith and defend my people." Some Jews were even led astray, not here, but in other places, to the point where they support the other side over their own people. But as I said on Rosh Hashanah, not only has it led many of us back home, but it's also led us to ask the right questions. Who exactly are we? What do we stand for? And why are our values just and moral? In the early 1900s, there was a school of Zionist thinkers who were concerned that if the Jewish people built a new state of their own in Palestine, it had to be embedded with Jewish culture, tradition, and heritage. And even though many of them were not even particularly observant, they argued that the language of the new state had to be Hebrew, and that the weekend had to be based around Shabbat. Jewish holidays and observances should be built into the character of the calendar, and Hebrew literature, publications, and thoughts had to flood the marketplace of ideas. One such thinker was Chaim Nachman Bialik, who, though he died in 1934, became known as Israel's national poet. In a poem he composed in 1898, entitled, "Should You Wish to Know the Source," Bialik wrote, "If you, my brother, know not this, then enter now the house of God, the house of study old and gray, throughout the scorching summer days, throughout the gloomy winter nights, at morning, midday, or at eve. And there you will behold a group of Jews from the exile, who bore the yoke of its burden, who forget their toil through a worn-out page of Talmud." The haunting imagery Bialik employs offers us a glimpse into the world of the shtetl. Despite crushing oppression from external forces, loyal Jews, both young and old, remain huddled around the worn pages of the Talmud. It is in their thirst for continuity, their desire to find solace in tradition, and their recognition that the Jewish heritage is worth securing at any price that allowed them to remain firmly rooted in their faith. In our day, and especially in this past year, we too look for solace. We too search for truth. We too have each other. But what we haven't quite had, what we haven't done, where we may have missed the mark, is what is missing from the story of our poem. The image of us huddled around the pages of worn-out volumes of Talmud. Through the challenges of this past year, we have found solace in each other. When it felt as if the country that once embraced us so warmly was tending to back away from us in our time of need, we returned to the synagogue. We, like Jews around the world, recommitted ourselves to our faith. We began investigating what it is that we stand for and why it is that our detractors are wrong in the way they characterize us. And so now, as we affirm on this sacred day our covenantal relationship with our faith and with our people, I believe the time is ripe to renew our commitment in the most meaningful way. Now that we have once again huddled together around the familiar warmth and comfort of the synagogue walls, it is time to place the worn pages of the Talmud back on the tables that sit between us. Last year, I challenged this holy and remarkable congregation to help create a real Shabbat community here at Temple Beth Am. I challenged you to come to Friday night services a minimum of once a month. And while not everyone has completely filled up their bingo cards yet, attendance all year was dramatically improved. We allocated resources toward hiring a full-time Shabbat coordinator, and as you will see, we have substantially upgraded and enhanced the variety of Shabbat opportunities we now offer. I'm not bribing you with bingo cards this year, but I am hoping you will continue spending Shabbat with your spiritual community as often as you can. But in addition to Shabbat, I have a new challenge for you this year. This year, I ask you to look closely through the prism of Bialik's prose. I ask you to take a peek back at the villages of our great-grandparents and our great-great-grandparents. I ask you to envision societies where Jews, whether observant or not, were knowledgeable about their faith. Their level of observance may have varied, but they each knew how to live and think Jewishly. They knew who they were and where they came from. They knew that the study of Torah led to morality and meaning, and that neglecting it distanced them from their values and their community. Unlike our ancestors, we here in this country, in this day and age, have cast off the shackles of servitude from which our ancestors suffered. But at the same time, we've become untethered from the deep wisdom of our heritage. That is why today, I'm announcing the birth of Beth Am University. I'm inviting you back to school, here, on this incredible campus, to return to the basics. Beth Am University will be based on 4 fundamental pillars: Hebrew, Torah, Israel, and Jewish history. We will offer 8-week courses taught by some of the finest educators in Miami, which is why I agreed to teach myself. We'll have professors, Orthodox and Reform rabbis, even a federal judge, the incomparable Roy Altman. The first semester will be January and February, and the second semester will be March and April. Before you leave, and after you leave, actually, and before you come back from wherever it is that you go. We'll meet here on Wednesday nights. One night a week, we will transform our campus into an adult center of Jewish learning. There'll be one set of classes, then a break and an opportunity to grab a snack and mingle, and then another set of classes. You can take a class the first hour, or the second hour, or both. There will also be Zoom classes, selections for those who can't make it here on Wednesday evenings. And each time you complete an 8-week course, you'll get a certificate. Once you accumulate enough certificates, you'll earn a Beth Am University degree and an opportunity to move up to another level of educational opportunities. Now, these certificates are going to look great on your LinkedIn profiles, and they will greatly enhance your resumes. You will begin to receive job offers to teach at Hebrew schools all over the country. You know, every night I drive home, and there's a particular church in between here and my house. I drive by every Wednesday night, and I see it's packed with people. And I know that their Wednesday night is education night. And for 10 years driving home, I dreamed, wow, if they can do it, can't we? This year, my challenge to everyone here is to sign up for one class. I'm asking everyone for 8 hours. 8 hours on Wednesday nights or on Zoom to commit to learning modern Hebrew, learning Torah, Israel, or Jewish history. To familiarize or refamiliarize yourself with our tradition and do it together here as our community. Imagine if you took one 8-week class a year, year after year after year. Not only will you have fun, not only will you not only have fun, not only will you have the opportunity to be with your friends, but each year you will double, triple, and quadruple your Jewish knowledge. Every year on Passover, when we open our Haggadahs around the Seder table, we read about the 4 sons: the wise son, the evil son, the simple son, and the son who does not know how to ask. What exactly is the difference between these 4 sons? According to Hasidic thought, 2 of the sons are good and 2 of the sons are bad. The wicked son is castigated because he does not identify with his people and he's not interested in their future. The son who does not know how to ask is also negative because he is not moved by the circumstances of his people. He doesn't care what happens to them. On the other hand, the wise son is admired because he is knowledgeable in his tradition and he sees himself as bound up in the bond of the Jewish people. The simple son is often mistranslated. The Hebrew word tam in Hebrew can mean simple, but it really means pure. The pure son is admired because though he does not have the knowledge and background of the wise son regarding the history and culture of his people, he is nevertheless deeply moved by his connection to Judaism and the Jewish people. The pure son wants to learn because his heart is inspired. In my opinion, we here, this holy congregation, we are an amalgam of the wise son and the pure son. Some of us are exceedingly knowledgeable in Torah. Others speak Hebrew or have a working familiarity with it. Many of us are quite well read and educated in our history and the unfolding story of our people in the state of Israel. We all have the roots of the wise son planted inside of us. But we also have the seeds of the pure son yearning for attention. There are other parts of us that wish we knew some more Torah, or spoke Hebrew, or were better prepared to defend the just and moral principles of the state of Israel in a way that leaves us spiritually satisfied and intellectually nourished. This past year, we were caught in the vortex of October 7th, the surge in global anti-Semitism, and a rude awakening from our slumber here in America. And while the hatred swirled around us, the pride we felt in our people has led us back to the basics of our faith. For too long, we have ceded the honor of the wise child to the traditional Jewish world. We've been content to remain in the chair of the pure child, engaged but uninformed. We allowed the wise child to monopolize our story because he was the only one who spoke our native tongue and the only one who made regular time for the study of Torah and the wisdom of our people as it evolved through the centuries. But this does not have to be. I've made Torah study the central pillar of my rabbinate and in many ways my life. I see the world differently because I live in the world of Torah. And I want you desperately to share that gift and that experience as well. In my mind, it's time to level the playing field among all Jews. The Torah is not the property of one group of Jews. It is the heritage of each one of us, and it is the responsibility of every Jew to safeguard it. This year, I'm offering you Beth Am University, an opportunity to slide into the chair of the wise child. An opportunity to learn the truth about our people and its history so that you can go out into the world and defend Israel and Judaism both honestly and openly. In this chaotic world we find ourselves, there can be nothing more liberating than seeking out the truth, only to find it is exactly what you hoped it would be. I promise that is what you will find, but only if you begin the search. At the beginning of his reign, King Solomon knew that his youth and experience could be problematic. In his plea to God, he asked for the ability to tell the difference between right and wrong, truth and falsehood. Pleased with his request, God responded, "Because you asked for this, you didn't ask for long life, you didn't ask for riches, you didn't ask for the life of your enemies, but you have asked for discernment in dispensing judgment. Now, do as you have spoken. I grant you a wise and discerning mind." On this Yom Kippur, 5785, let us acknowledge what we know and what we do not, and plead with God like King Solomon, that we too should be granted with wisdom and a discerning mind. This year, wisdom and discernment are placed before you. This year, it is all about the you. This year, we have a chance once again to ascend to an even higher level. And I pray that this is God's will. Amen.